The thin violet air of Kepler 186f tasted of ozone and regret. For private first class, Jacob Miller, it was the taste of his job. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a mortician, a grave digger on a world that wasn't his, for a creature he'd been trained to hate. The alien soldier lay half-submerged in the rust-colored mud, its chitinous armor cracked like obsidian glass, revealing flesh the color of a deep space nebula. The manual called them the Cathar, the Scourge. Jake just called them dead. As he plunged his shovel into the unforgiving soil, a soft, wet gasp cut through the wind. He froze. It wasn't the wind. It came from the body. He dug a grave for an alien soldier, then realized the body was still breathing. The battle for Elysian Fields had lasted 72 standard hours. 72 hours of plasma fire, melting rock of kinetic rounds screaming through an atmosphere too thin to care, and of men and Cathar dying in the red dust. Now silence reigned. It was a loud, heavy silence, punctuated by the mournful whistle of the wind across the blasted landscape, and the rhythmic scrape of Jake Miller's entrenching tool. Burial detail, the job they gave to the guys who were either too lucky or too slow in the last firefight. Jake figured he was a bit of both. He'd survived the Cathar's pincer movement on Ridge 247, a fact that owed more to his uncanny ability to find the deepest foxhole than any particular skill with a pulse rifle. His reward was this: a shovel, a list of coordinates, and a planet full of ghosts. He'd already buried 2 of his own today. Private Evans, a kid from New Dallas, who'd never stopped talking about his mother's apple pie. Sergeant Chen, a man so stoic, Jake had once seen him take shrapnel to the arm and complain only that it had ruined his favorite jacket. Jake dug their graves with a reverent precision, folding their dog tags into their stiff hands, whispering a half-forgotten prayer his grandmother used to say. It felt right. It felt human. This was different. His current assignment was a Cathar. The coordinates from command pinged on his helmet's HUD, designating a crumpled form in a shallow crater. The alien was massive, easily 8 feet tall, even coiled in death. Its body was a terrifying fusion of biology and warfare. 4 primary limbs, 2 ending in wicked scythe-like claws, and 2 in multi-jointed manipulators that could operate their energy weapons. Its head was a long, triangular affair, with a cluster of unblinking, multifaceted eyes. Its armor, a natural chitin that was the envy of human material. Scientists was a patchwork of iridescent black and deep blue. Or it had been. Now it was shattered around the torso, a gaping wound leaking thick violet ichor that steamed in the cold air. Just another bug, Jake muttered the words, fogging the inside of his faceplate. He repeated the words his CO Captain Thorne had drilled into them. They're not like us. They don't think. They don't feel. They are a swarm driven by a hive instinct to expand and consume. Hating them is a waste of energy. Just kill them. Jake didn't hate it. He was too tired to hate. He just wanted to dig the hole roll the thing in and move on to the next set of coordinates. He set his rifle down, leaning it carefully against a scorched rock, and began to work. The ground was a stubborn mix of rock and metallic dust. Each shovelful was a labor, a grunt of exertion that seemed to be stolen by the wind. The 2 small suns of the Kepler system, one a tired orange dwarf, and the other a brilliant white, hung in the purple sky, offering little warmth. He worked methodically, his movements economical, honed by weeks of this grim routine. He didn't look at the body. He focused on the hole, on the rhythm of his work. Dig, lift, toss, repeat. It was a mantra against the silence. After an hour, the grave was deep enough. Protocol dictated a minimum of 6 feet. No one would check, but Jake did it anyway. Some habits, Some standards were all that separated you from the savagery of it all. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of a gritty glove and finally turned to face the dead alien. He grabbed one of its thick lower limbs. The texture was like cool, smooth stone. It was heavy, a dead weight of alien muscle and bone. He planted his feet, getting leverage, and pulled. The body slid reluctantly through the mud. That's when he heard it. A soft, wet, hitching sound. Shk! Gah! Jake froze, muscles locked tight. He scanned the horizon. A Cathar patrol, a scavenger. The landscape was empty. Just rocks, craters, and the whispering wind. He held his breath, listening. Silence. Just the wind, he told himself, his heart hammering against his ribs. Wind playing tricks in the crater. He pulled again. The body shifted the shattered carapace, grating against the rocky soil. Sk! Psh! This time it was undeniable. It was a breath, a ragged, painful, fluid-filled breath. It came from the mangled torso of the Cathar at his feet. Jake scrambled back his shovel, clattering to the ground. He snatched his rifle, the weapon leaping into his hands with practiced ease. He flicked the safety off the click, echoing in the vast emptiness. His training screamed at him. No prisoners. Alliance Command Order. 37 Delta. No Cathar survivors. They are too dangerous, too alien. Their biology is a weapon in itself. Terminate on sight. He centered the rifle's holographic sight on the alien's head. His finger tightened on the trigger. It was the logical thing to do, the safe thing, an act of mercy even. The creature was clearly dying. One clean shot through the head cluster, and its suffering would be over. His duty would be done. He looked down the sights. He saw the cluster of crystalline eyes, dull and caked with mud. He saw the mandibles parted slightly. He saw the subtle, almost imperceptible rise and fall of a section of its thorax right near the wound. Breathing. It was breathing. He was digging a grave for a living thing. His finger trembled on the trigger. He'd killed dozens of them in the heat of battle. It was easy then. A flash of movement, a hostile target, a burst of plasma. You didn't think, you just did. But this wasn't battle. This was an execution. The alien's head shifted, a minute agonizing movement. One of its multifaceted eyes, the one least obscured by mud, seemed to focus on him. There was no malice in it, no threat. Just a dark, endless depth. Jake lowered his rifle. "What the hell am I doing?" he whispered to the uncaring wind. The choice he was about to make violated a dozen regulations and could get him court-martialed or killed. But standing there over an open grave and a dying enemy who was looking at him, he realized there was one law that felt more important than any order handed down by command. You don't bury the living. With a curse that was half prayer, he slung his rifle over his shoulder and knelt beside the alien soldier. The grave could wait. The decision was one thing. The execution was another entirely. Private Miller was a grunt, not a medic, and certainly not a xenobiologist. His medical training consisted of slapping a biofoam patch on a gunshot wound and hoping for the best. And that was for humans. This creature was a walking biological mystery. First he had to move it. Leaving it in the open was a death sentence. A human patrol would finish it off without a second thought, and a Cathar patrol? Well, he didn't know what they did with their wounded, but he doubted it would be good for his health to be found with one. His HUD's map showed an abandoned survey outpost about a click east. It was a pre-war installation, a relic from when humans thought Kepler 180 was just a rock rich in neodymium. It was marked as structurally unsound and off-limits, which made it the perfect hiding place. "All right, big guy," Jake grunted, trying to get a firm grip. "Let's see if we can get you out of this hole." The Cathar was impossibly heavy. Its body was dense, its chitinous plating weighing as much as steel. He tried to drag it by its limbs, but its dead weight was too much. He was panting within minutes, his muscles screaming in protest. The alien remained conscious, its breathing a constant rattling reminder of its fragility. It made no move to help or hinder him, its dark eyes simply tracking his movements. Frustration and desperation warred within him. He was wasting time. He looked at his shovel, then at the crater. An idea sparked. It was stupid, but it might work. He used the shovel as a lever, jamming it under the Cathar's body and using a rock as a fulcrum. Slowly, painstakingly, he managed to shift the creature's mass, rolling it onto a large, flat piece of debris, a shattered section of hull from a destroyed troop carrier. It wasn't a sled, but it would have to do. The journey to the outpost was a special kind of hell. The kilometer felt like a marathon across a landscape designed by a sadist. Jake pulled his boots, slipping on the loose scree, his lungs burning in the thin atmosphere. Every 100 meters he had to stop gasping for air, his vision swimming with black spots. The metal plate scraped and groaned a sound that seemed loud enough to alert every soldier, human or otherwise, within a 5-click radius. Through it all, the Cathar was silent. It lay on the makeshift sled, its life leaking out into the red dust. A few times, a low clicking sound emanated from its mandibles, a sound Jake couldn't interpret. Was it pain? Fear a warning he didn't know. He just kept pulling. This had become his mission now. He didn't know why, but the simple act of refusing to kill the creature had forged a strange, unspoken bond of responsibility. He couldn't let it die now. Not after this. Finally, the squat, dilapidated dome of the survey outpost appeared over a rise. Its hull was pockmarked and weather-beaten, a faded Alliance logo barely visible beneath years of dust. The main airlock was fused shut, but Jake knew from the schematics that there was an emergency maintenance hatch on the lee side. He found it half buried in a sand drift. With a final desperate surge of adrenaline, he cleared the sand and wrenched the rusted wheel. It groaned in protest, but finally gave way. The hatch hissed open, revealing a dark, cavernous space that smelled of stale air and decay. Getting the Cathar inside was the final ordeal. He managed to drag the sled to the edge of the hatch and, with gravity's help, tipped it in. The alien tumbled into the darkness with a heavy, sickening thud, followed by a sharp hiss of pain. Jake winced, sliding in after it. "Sorry," he muttered, closing the heavy hatch behind him. The outpost was plunged into darkness. Jake flicked on his helmet's shoulder-mounted lamp. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a single, large room littered with abandoned equipment. Dust motes danced in the light. In the center of the room lay the Cathar, a broken heap of black kitten and violet blood. He had to do something about the wound. It was a massive, ugly tear in its side, where a piece of shrapnel had ripped through the armor. The edges were jagged, and the tissue beneath pulsed weakly. He opened his medkit. It was stocked with human supplies, biofoam sterile sutures, pain blocker, injections, plasma expanders. He had no idea if any of it would work on Cathar physiology. It could be like pouring poison into the wound for all he knew. "Okay, let's not make things worse," he reasoned aloud, his voice sounding small in the vast dead room. He decided against the chemicals. The basics would have to do. He took out the sterile saline solution and a debriding tool. Kneeling beside the creature, he hesitated. This close, the alien was even more intimidating. Its scythe-like claws, though, still looked sharp enough to tear through his suit. Its face was a mask of unreadable angles and lenses. I'm gonna clean this, okay?" he said, as if talking to a frightened animal. "Just trying to help." As his gloved hand, holding a saline-soaked cloth, approached the wound, one of the Cathar's upper limbs shot out with shocking speed. It didn't strike him. It simply wrapped around his wrist. The grip wasn't crushing, but it was unbreakably firm. Jake froze, his blood turning to ice. This was it. He'd made a fatal mistake. The creature had been playing possum, and now it would kill him. He could feel the pressure of the multi-jointed fingers on his arm, a demonstration of immense power held in check. He looked from his captured wrist to the alien's head. The cluster of eyes stared at him, unblinking. The clicking sound started again, faster this time, more complex. It wasn't a sound of aggression. It felt inquisitive. His heart was a drum against his ribs. He could try to pull away to reach for his sidearm, but he didn't. He met the alien's gaze and slowly, deliberately relaxed his arm. He let the cleaning cloth fall from his fingers. It was an act of surrender, an act of trust. After a long, tense moment, the pressure on his wrist lessened. The alien's grip loosened, and the hand slowly retracted. It was a test. He had passed. With a shaky breath, Jake picked up the cloth again. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's try this again." This time, when he reached for the wound, the Cathar didn't move. He began to gently clean the area, clearing away the caked mud and bits of shattered armor. The alien remained perfectly still, though he could hear the faint, pained hiss of its breathing. As he worked, he noticed something odd. The flesh around the wound was beginning to secrete a thick, translucent gel. It seemed to be a natural coagulant, sealing the smaller capillaries. Its biology was trying to save itself. All he could do was help it. He cleaned the wound as best he could, removing the foreign debris. He couldn't stitch it closed. The flesh was too tough, and the shattered carapace was in the way. He did the only other thing he could think of. He took the largest sterile bandage pad he had a field dressing for a major torso wound and pressed it firmly against the injury. He used 3 rolls of medical tape to secure it in place, the white strips looking absurdly flimsy against the alien's dark body. It wasn't much. It probably wouldn't be enough. But it was all he had. Exhausted, Jake sat back on his heels. He had dragged an 8-foot-tall enemy soldier across a click of hostile terrain, hidden it in a derelict station, and given it first aid. He had violated orders, risked his life, and exhausted his strength. The Cathar's head turned slightly. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the floor, a sound different from the clicking. It felt different. The dark eyes watched him, and for the first time Jake didn't see a monster or a bug. He saw a patient, a survivor, and he realized with a sudden chilling clarity that he had no idea what to do next. The next 48 hours passed in a surreal, clandestine routine. Jake's official duties still called. He had to show up for muster, run his assigned patrols, and continue the grim work of burial detail, all while pretending nothing was out of the ordinary. Every spare moment was a risk a stolen slice of time dedicated to the secret in the derelict survey station. He would falsify patrol routes, claiming to investigate strange energy readings or geological instabilities, excuses that were just plausible enough to satisfy his squad leader, Sergeant Davis. Davis was a hard-nosed veteran who saw the universe in black and white, us and them. If he ever found out what Jake was doing, a court-martial would be the least of Jake's worries. Jake's visits to the station were brief and fraught with tension. He brought what he could, smuggle his own water rations, and a few high-energy nutrient paste packs. He didn't know what the Cathar ate, but he figured hydration and calories were universal constants for life. The first time he offered water, he poured some into a shallow metal basin he'd found. The Cathar, who Jake had started calling Click in his head due to the noises it made, watched him intently. After Jake backed away to a safe distance, the alien extended a delicate, slender manipulator from one of its larger hands, an appendage he hadn't noticed before. It dipped the tip into the water, then brought it to its mandibles. It repeated the process, slow and deliberate. It was drinking. The nutrient paste was a different story. He squeezed a line of the grey goo onto a plate. Click inspected it, touched it, but refused to eat. Jake tried to reason it out. Maybe it was a carnivore. Maybe it photosynthesized. Or maybe it just wasn't hungry. The creature's condition was improving, but at a glacial pace. The self-secreted gel had hardened over the wound beneath his bandage, forming a protective amber-like seal. The rattling in its breathing was less pronounced. It was still weak, barely moving from its spot on the floor. But it was clearly a survivor. Their communication was a silent, patient dance of gesture and observation. Jake learned that a slow, steady clicking meant calm or acknowledgement. A series of sharp, rapid clicks meant agitation or pain, like when he had to change the now filthy bandage. A low hum which vibrated through the deck plates seemed to be a sign of curiosity. One evening, while Jake was cleaning his rifle in the dim light of the station, Click shifted its massive body. It extended one of its scythe-like arms, not in a threatening way, but with a slow, deliberate grace. Using the sharp tip, it began to scratch a pattern into the thick dust on the floor. Jake stopped cleaning, watching with fascination. It drew a circle, then another larger circle around it. It then drew a third, smaller circle orbiting the first. It tapped the third circle, then pointed a manipulator at itself. It tapped the larger central circle, looked at Jake, and made a low humming sound. Jake's breath hitched. It was a star chart, a sun, a planet, and a moon. It was pointing at the planet, its home world, and then at itself. Then it tried to replicate the star system they were in, now drawing the two suns and the third planet from the primary. It pointed at the planet, then at Jake. "You're telling me where you're from?" Jake whispered, a sense of awe washing over him. This wasn't just an intelligent creature. It was a cartographer, a being capable of abstract thought. Jake got it. He knelt down and, using his own finger, drew a simple diagram of his own solar system, Sol with its third planet clearly marked. He tapped the third planet. "Earth," he said, pointing to his chest. "My home. Earth!" Click let out a series of soft, inquisitive clicks. It reached out and traced Jake's diagram, its claw hovering over the drawing of Earth. The gap between them, soldier and soldier, human and alien, seemed to shrink in that dusty, silent room. They were two people, a universe away from their respective homes, stranded on a battlefield. The breakthrough came on the third day. Jake's suit was equipped with a standard-issue multispectrum analysis package, mostly used for identifying atmospheric contaminants or alien flora. On a hunch, he activated it, setting it to passive mode to analyze the air around Click. He wasn't expecting to find anything. But the analyzer chirped. A complex waveform scrolled across his HUD. It was identifying complex pheromones being released in controlled minute bursts from glands on the Cathar's neck and thorax. The patterns were intricate, almost like Morse code, but infinitely more complex. They shifted and changed in response to Jake's movements to the sounds in the room. Jake's heart pounded. This wasn't just biological exhaust. This was language. He accessed his suit's linguistic translation library. It was a long shot. The library was based on known signal structures, radio waves, sonic pulses. It had no framework for a chemical-based language. He initiated a heuristic learning program, a piece of deep AI software designed to find patterns in chaos. He fed the analyzer's data stream directly into it. The AI whirred its processors struggling. Analyzing non-standard signal, unknown syntax, probability of language. 47%. Jake looked at Click. Can you do that again? The star chart. He pointed to the dusty diagram on the floor. Click seemed to understand. It repeated the gestures, pointing to its home system and then to itself. As it did, the pheromone levels spiked. The AI on Jake's HUD went wild, correlating gestural data with biochemical signatures. Pattern recognition initiated. Probability of language. 82%. Building lexical framework. A few garbled words. Nonsense translations appeared on his screen. Home self. Object star. Concept belonging. Jake pointed to himself. Jake, he said clearly. The pheromones pulsed again. Translating. Sound symbol association. Identity unknown. Descriptor, helper, keeper. The AI was learning. It was slow and clunky, but it was a start. A bridge was being built, molecule by molecule, across an impossible divide. He then had a chilling thought. He pointed to the healing wound on Click's side. He made a gesture like a gun with his hand and mimicked the sound of his pulse rifle. Cathar, he said, pointing at Click. Human, he said, pointing at himself. Fighting. Click became very still. The pheromone output shifted, becoming sharper, more acrid. The air filled with a scent that even through his filters felt like anger and grief. Translating. Concept war. Concept pain. Query why. The single word appeared on his HUD in stark block letters. Why Jake was taken aback. He had expected a tactical query or a threat. Not this. Not a question that echoed the one in his own soul every single night. Why were they fighting? Why were they dying here so far from home? Because you attacked us. Jake said the words, feeling hollow even as he spoke them. You invaded our colonies. Proxima Trappist 1 now here. The pheromones swirled. The AI struggled to keep up. Rebuttal untruth. Clarification we defend. Concept the great crime. Jake frowned. The great crime. What are you talking about? We were explorers, miners. Accusation, you consume the spawning pools. Accusation, you devour our young. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He stared at the alien, at the translated text on his display. It was the most insane, horrifying thing he had ever heard. The Cathar weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting because they believed humans were monsters who ate their children. That's not true, Jake stammered. We would never... It's a lie. The pheromones pulsed with a desperate, insistent energy. Belief absolute. Source the high command. Motive extinction of the consumers. Jake's blood ran cold. It all clicked into place. The Cathar's ferocity. Their refusal to surrender. Their seeming hatred of humanity. It was all built on a foundation of lies, fed to them by their own leaders. They weren't a mindless swarm. They were a people, convinced they were fighting a righteous war to save their species from baby-eating monsters. He looked at the creature before him, this wounded soldier who had just shown him a map of his home. He wasn't an enemy. He was a victim, just like Private Evans, just like Sergeant Chen. The war was a lie, and in that derelict station, with the truth hanging in the air between them, Jake Miller realized his mission had changed. It wasn't just about saving one alien life anymore. It was about saving everyone's. The revelation shattered Jake's universe. War was simple when you had an enemy. It was a clear, defined line, us versus them. Now that line had been blurred into an ugly, incomprehensible smear. He spent the next patrol in a daze, his squad mates' chatter about rotation and ration packs fading into white noise. All he could see were the words on his HUD, "You devour our young." He had to know more. He had to understand how a lie that monstrous could take root. That night, he returned to the outpost, his mind racing. He brought another water pack and a thermal blanket he'd requisitioned from a supply crate. The station was cold at night, and while he didn't know if Cathar were warm or cold-blooded, he figured it couldn't hurt. As he entered, he found Click had moved. It was propped against a wall, its posture stronger. The amber-like seal over its wound was thicker, darker. It was healing and faster than any human could. He set down the supplies. "We need to talk," he said, activating the translation AI. The pheromones in the air signaled a calm welcome. "Greeting, helper." Status strength returns. "My name is Jake," he said, pointing to himself. Click tilted its head. A new series of pheromones wafted towards him. The AI worked. Processing. New lexical item, JAKE. Identity Jake. Then it responded with its own burst. Identity Xylos. It had a name. Xylos. It wasn't just Click or the alien anymore. It was a person. Xylos's Jake repeated the name, tasting the strangeness of it. "Tell me about the great crime. Tell me why you think we eat your children." Xylos's posture stiffened. The air filled with the chemical equivalent of sorrow and rage. The story unfolded on Jake's HUD, a tragic narrative pieced together from pheromonal bursts. Xylos was not a soldier. The translation AI struggled with the concept, offering words like scribe, historian, and finally settling on lawkeeper. Its role was to preserve the history and knowledge of its people. It had been conscripted, given armor and a weapon, and sent to fight like millions of others. The Cathar, Xylos explained, were oviparous. They laid their eggs in communally tended, geothermal warmed spawning pools. These pools were sacred, the heart of their culture and the future of their species. According to the Cathar High Command, when humans first arrived in the TRAPPIST-1 system, they had identified these energy-rich geothermal pools as a prime power source. The initial reports broadcast to the entire Cathar population were of human machinery dredging the pools, destroying the eggs, and of human soldiers consuming the protein-rich contents. Image data broadcast, contents broken shells, contents human machines in sacred waters. Voice of high command, behold the monsters. The translator spat out. It was faked, Jake insisted, his voice rising. It has to be. We use geothermal energy, sure, but we're not ghouls. We would have detected life. We would have... He trailed off. Would they have? He thought of the relentless corporate drive for resources, the corners that were sometimes cut. But eating them, it was unthinkable. "Show me," Jake said. "Do you have a record of it?" Xylos shifted. From a seam in its carapace, the same slender manipulator that had tasted the water emerged again. This time, its tip glowed with a soft, internal blue light. It touched a panel on its forearm armor. A section of the chitin slid back, revealing not flesh, but a recessed data port surrounding a crystalline shard embedded in its arm. Lawkeeper Archive. Truth of the people. Data contained were here. It was a living archive, a walking hard drive. "Can I see it?" Jake asked. "Can you show me what they showed you?" Xylos hesitated. The pheromones it released were complex, a mix of distrust and desperate hope. "Access requires trust. Danger, my truth is my life." Jake understood. He was asking Xylos to show him its soul. He powered down his rifle and set it against the far wall. He took off his helmet, the thin, cold air of the station making him shiver. He placed the helmet on the floor beside the rifle. It was a gesture of complete vulnerability. "I am unarmed," Jake said, his voice clear in the quiet room. "I believe you. And I want to help you show everyone the truth." After a long moment, Xylos seemed to come to a decision. It gestured with its manipulator towards Jake's wrist-mounted datapad. "Interface possible." Jake's heart hammered. This was it. He knelt in front of Xylos, extending his arm. The alien's glowing blue manipulator reached out. It was a moment of supreme, terrifying trust. The alien that could tear him limb from limb was about to interface with his tech. His life was quite literally in its hands. The manipulator lightly touched his datapad. A cascade of code scrolled across the screen as the two technologies attempted to communicate. Jake's pad flashed with security warnings, which he frantically bypassed. Finally, the connection stabilized. A file was transferred. It was a video. Jake's hand trembled as he tapped play. The image was grainy, clearly Cathar footage. It showed a geothermal pool steam rising from the murky water. Then, a human excavation drone, a standard GEO-7 model, lowered a dredging scoop into the water. When the scoop came up, it was full of shattered gelatinous shells. The video then cut to a close-up of a human soldier in full armor, his faceplate obscured, picking up one of the broken eggs and bringing it towards his helmet as if to eat it. The whole thing was overlaid with a booming, deep Cathar voice, which Jake's AI translated as a furious, righteous sermon about the soulless human monsters. Jake watched it twice. Then a third time. He wasn't a propaganda expert, but he'd seen enough Alliance recruitment vids to know when something was being sold. The cuts, he said, pointing to the screen. Look, the cut from the drone to the soldier. It's a jump cut. They're two different scenes spliced together. He zoomed in on the soldier. And his armor. That's not standard infantry kit. That's an EOD suit explosive ordnance disposal. Why would an EOD tech be eating eggs? He zoomed in further on the background behind the soldier. It was blurry, but he could just make out the distinctive shape of a crashed Cathar fighter. He's not at a spawning pool. He's at a crash site. He's probably a first responder, checking the wreckage for unexploded ordnance. He looked up at Xylos. It's a lie. It's all a carefully edited lie. Xylos's pheromonal response was one of profound, soul-shaking confusion. Query logic flaw. Motive why our leaders lie. And that was the billion-credit question. Why? What could the Cathar High Command possibly gain from sending its own people to die in a war based on a fabrication? Jake's mind raced through the possibilities. A power grab, a way to unify a fractured people against a common, fabricated enemy, a cover for something else. Before he could voice any of these theories, his wrist pad buzzed with an incoming priority message. It was from Sergeant Davis. "Miller, where the hell are you? Your patrol route tracker just went dead. Report to my position. Coordinates 47 Gamma on the double." "We've got activity." Jake's blood ran cold. 47 Gamma. That was less than 200 meters from the survey station. Davis was practically on his doorstep. He looked at Xylos, then at the incriminating evidence on his datapad. He'd just found the key to ending the war, and he was about to be discovered by the one man who would never, ever understand. Warning presence detected. Xylos's pheromones spiked with alarm. Humans approach. Jake grabbed his helmet and rifle. "Stay here. Don't make a sound," he whispered, though he knew Xylos couldn't understand the words, only the intent. He scrambled out of the maintenance hatch, sealing it behind him, just as he heard the crunch of boots on gravel. He was caught. Jake sprinted from the shadow of the outpost, trying to look like he was coming from a different direction, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He rounded a large rock formation and saw them, Sergeant Davis and two other Marines from his squad, Corporal Jackson and Private Chen's younger brother, Liam. "Miller, there you are." Davis barked his voice, a gravelly accusation through the comms. He was a bull of a man, his customized armor scarred from a dozen campaigns. His helmet was off, revealing a grim, deeply lined face. "Mind telling me why your tracker died for the last hour?" Malfunction Sergeant Jake lied, his own voice sounding surprisingly steady. Dust contamination in the port. Had to strip it and clean it. He held up his wrist pad, which he'd quickly smeared with some red dirt. Davis's eyes' chips of grey granite narrowed. He wasn't buying it, not entirely. Contaminates a lot, your gear does, Miller. This is the third malfunction this week. Always seems to happen out in this sector. He gestured vaguely towards the abandoned outpost. Find anything interesting on your little walkabouts? Just rocks and regret, Sergeant. Same as everywhere else, Jake said, falling into the familiar cadence of a grunt. Uh-huh. Davis looked past Jake, his gaze lingering on the derelict station for a fraction too long. Well, since your gear is so unreliable, you can stick with me. Command picked up a faint energy signature, pulsing from this area. Non-human. Could be a downed drone, could be a bug playing possum. We're sweeping the area. Jake's stomach twisted into a knot. An energy signature. It had to be Xylos. The data shard, the healing process, the interface with his pad. Something was leaking a faint signal. We already swept this sector, Sergeant Jake said, trying to steer him away. It's clean, probably just geothermal interference. I'll decide what's clean, Davis snapped. Jackson, Liam, sweep the ridge. Miller, you're with me. We'll check these old structures. It was a nightmare scenario. Jake had no choice but to follow his mind, racing for a way to stop him. Every step towards the station was a step towards disaster. Disaster for him and a death sentence for Xylos. As they approached, Jake's mind flashed back to Xylos's data shard. The propaganda was just the surface layer. What if the shard contained more? What if it held the raw, unedited footage? Proof, irrefutable proof. But that proof was buried in an alien archive, inside an alien soldier, hidden in the very building they were about to search. Remember the briefing on these old pre-war domes, Miller Davis said, as they reached the fused main airlock. Structurally unsound. Watch your step. He began to circle the building, his rifle up, methodically checking every angle. He was a professional, thorough, and relentless. He would find the maintenance hatch. Jake had to create a diversion, a big one. Sergeant Jake said, his voice tight. Movement. 200 meters. Bearing 349er. Davis instantly dropped into a crouch, his rifle snapping up to scan the direction Jake had indicated. I don't see anything. On the other side of that bluff, Jake pressed, improvising frantically. Looked like Cathar, a scout, maybe two. Davis scanned the area with his rifle's thermal scope. Negative, Miller. There's nothing out there but heat shimmer. He turned his eyes, locking on to Jake's. The suspicion was back, colder and harder than before. You getting jumpy, Miller? No, Sergeant. I know what I saw. It was a dangerous game. A false report was a serious offense, but it was the only play he had. Before Davis could question him further, a new voice cut through the comms. It was Corporal Jackson. Sarge, you might want to see this. We found something over here. Davis gave Jake one last, lingering glare. On my way. Miller, you stay put. You so much as twitch, and I'll have you on latrine duty until the suns burn out. Davis jogged off towards the ridge, leaving Jake alone. He sagged against the wall of the outpost, his relief so profound it left him weak. That was too close. Jackson had inadvertently saved him. He had a few minutes, maybe less. He had to warn Xylos. He had to get that proof. He scrambled to the maintenance hatch, wrenched it open, and slid inside. The inner darkness was a welcome embrace. Xylos! He hissed, flicking on his shoulder lamp. The lawkeeper was alert, already sensing the proximity of the other humans. Danger close. They seek me. They're right outside, Jake said, the translation AI working frantically. They detected your energy signature. We have to get you out of here, and I need the rest of that data. The raw files, the proof that the video was faked. Xylos seemed to understand immediately. There was no hesitation now. The bond of trust forged in secrets and shared survival was solid. It pointed a manipulator towards the back of the station, where a collapsed tunnel led into what was once a subterranean geological lab. Escape path. Leads to ravine system. Then it extended its arm with the embedded data shard. The truth must be known. Take it. Jake connected his datapad again. This time the transfer wasn't just a single file. It was a deluge. Gigabytes of data began pouring into his pad, raw video feeds, unedited audio recordings, Cathar High Command communiques. It was a treasure trove, the complete, unvarnished history of the lie. The download was agonizingly slow. The progress bar on his screen crept forward. 10%, 20%. A voice crackled in his helmet, making him jump. It was Davis. Miller. What was Jackson found? It was a trick question. Davis was testing him. I don't know, Sergeant Jake replied, trying to keep his breathing even. You told me to stay put. A pause. It was a Cathar scout. Dead. Looks like it stumbled into one of our old minefields. You were right about seeing something. Lucky guess. Jake's blood ran cold. The relief he'd felt was a lie. The dead scout was the perfect excuse for Davis to intensify his search of the area. We're sweeping back your way, Davis continued, his voice casual, but with an underlying threat. Be there in 5 minutes. The download was at 60%. Transfer incomplete. Xylos stated its pheromones laced with urgency. It's too slow, Jake said, looking at the progress bar, then at the data shard still embedded in Xylos' arm. Is there another way? Can you just give it to me? Xylos retracted its arm. It looked at the crystal, then at Jake. A series of complex pheromones filled the air, a scent of pain, sacrifice, and resolve. Removal is possible. It will be damaging. The crystal wasn't just a storage device. It was integrated into its biology. Removing it would be like tearing out an organ. Is there any other way? Jake asked, his voice filled with dread. No time, Xylos replied. The truth is heavier than flesh. With a sharp cry, a sound that was half hiss, half shriek, Xylos jammed its other scythe-like claw into the seam of its own arm. With a wrenching, grinding motion, it began to pry the crystal out of its housing. Violet ichor welled up, pouring down its limb. Jake could only watch in horror and awe as the lawkeeper mutilated itself for the sake of a truth it had only just learned. The crystal came free with a sickening pop, and Xylos slumped against the wall, its arm mangled and bleeding. It held the glowing shard out to Jake in a trembling hand. Jake took the crystal. It was warm, pulsing with a faint inner light, and slick with Xylos' blood. Now go, Jake urged, helping the massive alien to its feet. Get to the tunnels. I'll lead them away. Xylos gave a final, slow click of acknowledgement. Identity Jake. Descriptor friend. Then it turned and disappeared into the darkness of the collapsed tunnel, leaving Jake alone with the terrible, beautiful price of truth in his hand. He could hear the crunch of Davis's boots just outside the hatch. Jake clutched the data crystal, its warmth a stark contrast to the ice in his veins. He had the proof, but he was trapped. Davis was just outside, and the crystal itself was a beacon of non-human energy. If Davis scanned him, he was finished. He looked around the derelict station in desperation. His eyes fell on a discarded piece of equipment, a heavy-duty power conduit, its lead lining thick enough to shield against radiation. It wasn't a proper Faraday cage, but it would have to do. He shoved the crystal inside the conduit, sealed the cap, and kicked it under a pile of debris in the darkest corner of the room. Just as he did, The maintenance hatch creaked open. Sergeant Davis stood silhouetted against the purple sky. "Miller," he said, his voice dangerously quiet as he stepped inside, rifle raised. "Fancy meeting you here." "Just checking the structural integrity," Sergeant Jake said, his heart trying to beat its way out of his chest. Figured it might be a good place for an observation post. Davis's lamp beam cut through the gloom, methodically sweeping the room. It passed over the scattered equipment, the dust-covered floor, and the pile of debris where the crystal was hidden. The beam lingered for a moment. Jake held his breath. "Smells weird in here." Davis noted his light moving on. "Like cinnamon and ozone, pheromones." Xylos's scent still lingered in the air. Old chemical leak, maybe, Jake offered. Davis walked slowly around the room, his boots crunching on the dusty floor. He stopped, his gaze fixed on a dark violet stain near the wall where Xylos had been resting. Blood. "What's this?" Davis asked, kneeling down to inspect it. He touched the stain with his gloved finger. Still wet. Jake's mind went blank. There was no explanation, no lie plausible enough to cover this. This was it. But before Davis could press the issue, his comms crackled again. It was command. A frantic voice cut through the static. "All units code. Red Cathar carrier has broken orbit. Repeat, a Cathar carrier is on a low atmospheric attack vector. They're hitting the main command post. All forces rally to Sector Alpha." Explosions rumbled in the distance, the vibrations traveling through the station's floor. The Cathar were launching a full-scale assault. Davis was on his feet in an instant, all suspicion of Jake erased by the immediate, overwhelming threat. "You heard him? Miller, let's move. The time for playing hide-and-seek is over." He ran out of the hatch, and Jake, after a split second of hesitation, followed. But as he ran towards the sounds of battle, his objective was clear. It wasn't Sector Alpha. The Cathar were attacking because of the lie. The High Command must have found out that their propaganda was compromised, or that a lawkeeper was missing. This was a desperate all-or-nothing gambit to wipe out the human forces before the truth could spread. Jake had the truth in his pocket, inside a lead-lined tube. But it was useless if he couldn't get it to the right people. And the right people were everyone. Every human soldier and every Cathar warrior, fighting and dying for a lie. He needed a broadcaster. A big one. The main communications relay for the entire planetary operation was located on a high plateau 3 clicks north, designated Relay Station Triton. It was a massive dish, the nerve center for all off-world communication. It was also, he knew, the most heavily defended position on Kepler 186F, second only to the command post itself. And right now, with the main assault hitting Sector Alpha Triton, would be on high alert, but its primary defenses would be facing outwards towards orbit, not inwards. He broke away from the path towards the main battle, melting into the labyrinth of rock formations that defined the planet's landscape. He was now officially AWOL, a deserter, a traitor. The thought barely registered. His purpose had narrowed to a single terrifying point. The journey to Triton was a sprint through a war zone. The sky was streaked with plasma fire and the contrails of interceptor missiles. The ground shook with distant impacts. Jake ran, ignoring the calls for him on the comms, which he had now muted. He was an army of one on a mission to end a war. He reached the base of the plateau as the 2 suns began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows. The relay station loomed above him, a skeletal giant of steel and ceramic against the twilight sky. The perimeter was protected by automated gun turrets and an energy fence. Getting in was impossible. He didn't need to get in. He just needed to get his signal out. He found a position in a cluster of rocks about 300 meters from the main dish. He pulled the conduit from his pack and carefully removed the glowing Cathar crystal. He then took out his datapad and with trembling fingers jury-rigged a direct interface. The screen came alive with the alien data, a chaotic storm of truth. Now for the hard part. He had to hack the relay. Alliance network security was formidable. He was a grunt, not a signals expert. But Xylos was a lore-keeper, a master of data, and its technology was embedded in the crystal. He activated his suit's microtransmitter, a short-range unit used for squad comms, and interfaced it with the datapad. He then initiated a program from the Cathar crystal, a file labeled simply Key. He didn't know what it would do, but he trusted Xylos. He aimed the transmitter at the relay dish and began the broadcast. Instantly, his datapad was flooded with Cathar code. The crystal wasn't just a storage device. It was an icebreaker, a key designed to slice through complex encryption. It began assaulting the relay station's firewall, using alien logic and processing algorithms that human programmers had never encountered. Alarms began to blare from the relay station. He'd been detected. On his datapad, security protocols flashed and died, bypassed by the Cathar program. A window opened. Uplink established. Select broadcast channel. He was in. He didn't select a specific channel. He selected all of them. Alliance military frequencies, civilian emergency bands, and using the Cathar crystal's knowledge, the encrypted frequencies used by the Cathar fleet itself. He selected the primary file, the raw, unedited footage of the GEO-7 drone at the spawning pool, followed by the separate, verifiable footage of the EOD soldier at the crash site. He added the captured Cathar High Command, communiques with his AI, providing a running, real-time text translation. And at the end, he added a simple message of his own, which he typed with shaking hands. "We have been lied to. Both of us. Cease fire. Look at the truth." He hit send. The data streamed from his tiny transmitter was captured by the massive relay dish and was blasted out into space, a shotgun blast of truth aimed at two warring fleets. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the automated turrets on the station's perimeter swiveled, not towards orbit, but towards his position. Red targeting lasers stabbed through the darkness, converging on his rocky hiding spot. He had succeeded, and now he was going to die for it. He closed his eyes, clutching the crystal, waiting for the impact. The whine of the turret cannons charging up sliced through the twilight, aimed directly at Jake's hiding spot. He braced for the end, clutching the crystal, a strange peace settling over him. He had done it. The truth was out, but the plasma bolts never came. Instead, the roar of a dropship engine drowned out the turrets. It swooped low, landing between Jake and the station, blocking their line of fire. The side door slammed open, revealing Sergeant Davis. His face, a mask of fury and disbelief. "Miller, you son of a bitch!" Davis's voice boomed over the external speakers. "You have 5 seconds to get your ass on this ship before I drag you on myself." Stunned, Jake scrambled aboard. As the ramp closed, he saw the battlefield through the viewport. It was silent. The Cathar carrier hung in a static orbit, and the Alliance fleet held its position. The battle had simply stopped. His broadcast had slammed the brakes on the entire war. Upon landing, Jake was immediately taken into custody. He wasn't thrown in a brig but placed in a secure debriefing room. He told them everything about finding Xylos, the communication, the lies, the sacrifice. He expected a court-martial, but the intelligence officers just listened, their faces grim, because his wild story explained the chaos erupting on every Cathar channel. His broadcast hadn't just been a message. It had been a spark in a powder keg, igniting a digital rebellion within the Cathar fleet. The next day, A xeno-diplomat entered the room, her tired eyes holding a flicker of hope. "Private Miller," she said. "We've opened a dialogue." She explained that the Cathar were now in a civil war. A massive rebel faction, armed with the truth from their own archives, unlocked by Xylos's data, was fighting the loyalist high command. The rebels had a hero, a figurehead who had survived and carried the truth in its very being. As a gesture of peace, they're transferring a wounded lawkeeper to our medical frigate, the diplomat said. "His name is Xylos. He's alive, and he asked for you." They took Jake to the observation deck of the Alliance frigate Nightingale. Below, through a thick, transparasteel window, human doctors worked carefully on a massive Cathar in a reinforced biobed, tending to a mangled arm. It was Xylos. As if sensing him, the lawkeeper turned its head and looked up. It couldn't see Jake, but Jake knew it felt his presence. The war wasn't over, but for the first time there was a chance born from a single choice in a muddy crater. Jake Miller, the gravedigger, hadn't buried an enemy that day. He had unearthed a future. In the vast cold darkness of space, we're often told that humanity's greatest strength is our firepower, our technology, our unyielding will to conquer. But the story of Private Miller and the lawkeeper Xylos suggests something different. It suggests our greatest strength lies in the moments we choose compassion over conflict, empathy over orders, and truth over the comfortable lies of war. One soldier faced with a dying enemy chose not to be an executioner, and that single choice echoed across a solar system, changing the fate of two species forever. It reminds us that the largest wars can be ended by the smallest acts of humanity. What did you think of Jake's story? Would you have made the same choice? Let us know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves stories about the best of humanity, and subscribe for more tales from the far reaches of space and the depths of the human heart. Thank you for listening.